Now to 24/24, the latest 2024 campaign news in the last 24 hours with a sneak peek ahead to the next 24 hours. First up, last night, the first GOP presidential debate took place in Milwaukee, and today the postmortem. What did they do and how did they do? Let's begin with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who took a page out of former President Donald Trump's playbook. He flung a few insults after Vivek Ramaswamy flung one himself.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for.
I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here. And the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, "What's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here?" was Barack Obama, and I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
Just like you did to Obama.
The same type of amateur.
And you'll help elect me just like you did to Obama, too. Give me that
the same type of amateur.
Such a mature conversation. Next up, another testy exchange between former South Carolina governor and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. The underlying topic was foreign policy.
That's a world war. We're trying to prevent war. Look at what Putin did today. He killed Prigozhin. When I was at the UN, the Russian ambassador suddenly died. This guy is a murderer, and you are choosing a murderer over a pro-American country.
You know, Nikki, I wish you well in your future career on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon.
You know, I'm not on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon. And you know,
Boeing came off of it, but you've been pushing this lie. You've been pushing this lie all week, Nikki.
You want to go and defund Israel? You want to
okay, let me address that. I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm going to
address each of those right now. This is the false lies of a professional politician. There you have it.
Your watch,
so the reality
make America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what? The foreign policy experience that you all have.
And this bruising exchange did not end on the debate stage. It apparently, as they say, had legs. So after the debate ended, Governor Haley had more to say. She took to Twitter to tweet, quote, "Vivek Ramaswamy, you have no foreign policy experience, and it shows." Moving on, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott took on President Joe Biden and his economic plan.
Joe Biden's Bidenomics has led to the loss of $10,000 of spending power for the average family. We can stop that by turning the spigot off at Washington, sending the money back to the states, and allowing the decisions to be made at their own houses. If you don't send it to Washington, we can't spend it. That's good news for the American people. During the Trump administration, when we were dealing with the COVID virus, we spent more money. But here's what happened at the end of our time in the majority. We had low unemployment, record low unemployment. Under Joe Biden, we've seen the exact opposite.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley had this response for Scott.
The truth is that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us, too. You have Ron DeSantis, you've got Tim Scott, you've got Mike Pence. They all voted to raise the debt, and Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt.
And lastly, Mr. No-Show. Former President Donald Trump skipped the debate, but you would think by all the mentions of his name that he was there. But a little fun fact, according to a rough count by ABC News, President Joe Biden was mentioned at least 10 more times than Trump. But one of the questions all 8 candidates were asked was, quote, if Trump were to be convicted and he does become the eventual nominee for the Republican Party, who would support him? Now, before I tell you what the candidates said, let me remind you, each candidate to get on that debate stage was required by the RNC to sign a loyalty pledge vowing to support the eventual nominee of the Republican Party. But here's how the candidates responded. Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former South Carolina governor, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum all raised their hands rather swiftly. Then there was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Vice President Mike Pence. They were slower to raise their hands to look around before doing so. And after these 6 raised their hands, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie reluctantly half raises his hand, or at least that's the way it looked. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson was the only one on the stage who did not raise his hand. And of course, President Joe Biden's team took this hand-raising moment and had a little fun with it. Last night, Biden tweeted this video with words, quote, "A bunch of Republicans on stage, one united MAGA ideology," end quote. Biden's team showing the Republican Party is not united on all things. Political analyst Mark Halperin joins me. Mark, Nice to talk to you. So, Mark, your thoughts 24 hours later.
Well, Greta, I was in Wisconsin for the debate and was reminded that people in Wisconsin are as wise as they are nice, but they're also pretty rowdy.
I'll take that as a personal compliment, although it wasn't intended for me.
It was intended that way. Look, that arena, great facility, and bodes well for the Republican convention next year because it's a great facility. I said the other day, there are 50 bars within 500 feet. And I got an email from a guy whose son works as a bouncer at one of the bars who said I undershot the number. And so I suspect the rowdy crowd was in some cases somewhat well served to cheer and turn that some of the clips you showed. Those events in the moment seem like they mean a lot. But I think we'll wait for the polling. But I think 4 candidates did well and 4 did poorly. But I don't expect the 4 who did well to see a huge rise in their poll numbers, with the exception, perhaps, my instinct is Ramaswamy may see a little bit of a poll uptake. I don't know that the others, as well as they might have done, are necessarily going to see a growth in their support. And so Donald Trump entered the debate as the front runner, and I think he's still a pretty overwhelming front runner.
What about the interview with Tucker Carlson on Twitter? Because I looked at the numbers and the impressions, which isn't necessarily watching, but people who sort of at a minimum flip by. It's like over 250 million. I forgot that. Here's the number I had from a couple hours ago: 250 to 236 million.
Once Elon Musk retweets a video, it's going to get a major boost, not just in the United States, but overseas. I was with a Trump senior advisor last night around the time Musk retweeted it. And he correctly predicted that you were going to see the number go into the millions, the tens, hundreds of millions. Again, you don't know. I think if you watch it for about 20 seconds, it counts as one of the impressions. But there's no doubt that Donald Trump was correct, that more people will have watched at least a portion of that interview. I was surprised he chose not to make any news in the interview. You look at the write-ups.
But you look at these numbers. Okay, maybe some people just looked at the 236 million. Look at 199,000 people retweeted it. So it took some. It wasn't just taking a look at it as it flips by.
Yeah. Look. He knew what he was doing when he agreed to do the interview with Tucker, and knew that it would air on X, formerly known as Twitter, in a way that's going to reach a lot. But again, that's not necessarily voters. It's people all over the world. And Donald Trump doesn't have a name ID problem. So I agree with you. It's fascinating that Tucker can build an audience like that with Musk's help on the platform. But it doesn't mean that the debate, doesn't matter. Like I said, I think even the people who did well probably won't see a change in their fortunes. But that's got nothing to do with the fact that he nearly broke Twitter with that interview, as newsless as it was.
I would have predicted that he would not have gotten those numbers, so I was dead wrong on that, because I think the numbers are quite extraordinary. Mark Halperin, thank you.
They are. They definitely are. Good to see you, Greta.